and whether or not it's legitimate and the correct decision making.
Well, and if it's a designation of narco-terrorism, are you aware of any broader counter-narcotic strategy that includes the largest sources of illegal drugs to America, like China's fentanyl?
Yeah, no, look, this is all kinds of problematic. I mean, you point out two big problems with it. One I alluded to earlier. We have now expanded the definition of what a terrorist is, and therefore a legitimate target, way beyond what the post-9/11 world did, to include anyone engaged in narco-trafficking, crucially also without congressional approval. Say what you want about the global war on terror after 9/11, it did at least have congressional authorization. Now we don't have that, and we've seen this huge expansion. And then second, if the point of all of this is to protect Americans from drugs, which is important and needs to be done, is this really accomplishing that? I mean, there are all kinds of things that go into the problem we have with drug abuse in this country. Does a couple dozen votes in the Caribbean really lead to a significant change in that, particularly since, as you also pointed out, there's no fentanyl involved in this. No fentanyl involved in this. The drugs they're interdicting seem to more likely be headed to West Africa or Europe. So it just doesn't seem to even connect if you're focused on the drug problem. And then, of course, there's the fact that Donald Trump keeps pardoning drug dealers. So if drugs were really the problem, why is he doing that? To me, it's more about Donald Trump wanting to assert his dominance in the Western Hemisphere than it is about really getting after the very real problem we have in this country with drug abuse.
Are any Republicans interested in the answers to any of the questions you just posed?
Not as interested as they should be. I mean, we did this, we had the hearing, we had the briefing. Mike Rogers and I talked to Admiral Halsey a couple days ago, I think. But there is not that interest to really get after the answers. Just ask a couple cursory questions, accept the answer, and move on. I don't think that's enough. Congress really needs to be involved in this and to exercise oversight. We're talking about launching yet another forever war. Remember how Donald Trump ran for president saying, I'm going to stop the forever wars? He's starting them. And we should be far more interested in the implications of that, the legality behind it, and where it's going.
Let me ask you about that briefing with Admiral Halsey. What was he able to fill in terms of the chain of command and his understanding of any strategy or legal rationale for the orders?
Yeah, not a lot. He did on the chain of command piece, and this is a little bit confusing. Who has the actual targeting authority? Apparently has moved around a little bit. Originally, it was the JSOC commander. That's not supposed to be the way it works. Again, the Southern Command commander, Admiral Halsey, should have had it. In some instances, they will designate that to the SOCOM commander, Special Operations Command. JSOC is one step below SOCOM. Now, ironically, or unusually, I guess, the JSOC commander, Admiral Bradley, is now the SOCOM commander. But typically, that would have been the person who would have had the authority. But also, Admiral Halsey told us, sometimes he did have the authority, sometimes the SecDef had the authority, and sometimes one of the Marine Expeditionary Force commanders had the authority. So that doesn't really make sense and doesn't seem to be a fairly disciplined approach to making sure that these decisions are following a clear chain of command. So there was that. And then Admiral Halsey did say he felt that he was following legal orders. But in the questioning, it seemed like he really didn't question that very deeply. It was more like, I got the orders, I assumed them to be legal, and I went about implementing them.
In terms of trying to suss out what is really going on, I don't want to stare at the tree and ignore the forest, and I know I just have another minute with you here. What do you think they're, and again, I hate to ascribe too much more strategy or motive to them than they deserve, but is there a larger strategy? And if there is, what do you think it is?
Well, here's what I'm worried about. Number one, I think the larger strategy is what I said earlier. Trump wants power. He wants power for himself. He wants power for the United States under his command. I think it's really about asserting control in the Western Hemisphere, and this is a way to do that. I think Trump also wants to be as free of Congress as he possibly can be. So he wants to do this and say, I'm the executive, I can do this. Congress doesn't have a say. And I think the final piece of this, and something that I think is a through line throughout all of the Trump administration's actions, is he wants to make it clear the law doesn't apply to him. Secretary Hegseth feels the same way. On issue after issue, on the tariffs, on sending troops to U.S. cities, on ICE, he has just blatantly disobeyed the law. I always like to use this example. It's not the Department of War. It's the Department of Defense, because that's what the law says, and the law hasn't been changed. And yet Secretary Hegseth insists on calling himself the Secretary of War. They don't think they have to follow the law. They want to be unbound by that so that they have greater freedom. To me, that undermines our representative democracy and our Constitution. Are we a nation of laws, or are we a totalitarian government being ruled by a monarch? I think we're still a nation of laws. I think they're trying to undermine that to enhance Trump's power.
Do you believe war crimes were committed?
I'm not going to reach that conclusion. I think we should absolutely investigate it. I don't like I don't like Trump being judge, jury, and executioner for any drug trafficker in the world. I'm not going to play that role in assessing the actions here, but they should be investigated. We should find out whether or not the answer to that question is close enough to yes to warrant a prosecution and warrant a further investigation. We shouldn't just sweep it under the rug and walk away.
Congressman Adam Smith, thank you for being so generous with your time today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I want to bring into our coverage senior political analyst, contributing host on Pod Save America, the host of the